So I'm here from an organisation called Cwmharri. We're based in Newtown, and we have built a reputation over the last 8 years of building a business around turning food waste into high nutrient compost. We're actually really interested in the whole waste story. Anybody who's spent any time thinking about natural systems and thinking about how nature works is aware that there is no such thing as waste in natural systems. We're really challenged to rethink the way we do things. We're living in a world in which energy is becoming much more expensive, it's getting much harder to get hold of, and we've set up systems that are incredibly wasteful. So I'm very interested in turning waste back into resources again. We've had a lot of experience over the last few years working out how to turn food waste back into a resource again. And about 3 years ago, I was invited to go over to the back of the Cwmharri factory on the Vastry estate in Newtown. It took me round the back and showed me this not very promising space and said, "Any ideas? What would you do with that?" We immediately said, "Well, I like a challenge. I like to try and see if we can do beautiful and interesting things in difficult, challenging places. We want to inspire people about what's possible, really." So I tried to look around the back of the factory and said, "Yeah, we could turn that into a beautiful community garden. We've got the resources we need. We didn't have any topsoil, but we had a lot of compost, and we had a big industrial building, which meant that we could collect the water. So that's the basic ingredients for a garden." So from not very promising beginnings, they used to turn trucks around there, so it was very compacted. We started engaging with the local community and building a garden. We're also trying to reach out and give people the skills to grow. I mean, so many of us have become so disconnected from the food supply, we don't really know where it comes from. Perhaps not so much people here at the Small Garden Show, but more generally speaking, it's a real issue, is the degree to which we're disconnected from the environment, and we're disconnected from where our resources come from. And we've got this idea about waste, that some magical big truck turns up every week and takes it all away somewhere and makes it disappear. Well, there's a whole economic realities to this. So I'm a permaculture design tutor. I work with student groups from all over the world, and we do very intensive courses training people in how ecology works, how we can work more closely with nature, and how we can build abundant, sustainable environments without needing loads of external resources to drive it forward. So I just happened to be running one of these courses back in May 2010, when I was first invited by Cwmharri to go and have a look at their back lot. So there's my student group, and we thought, well, if we're going to do a community garden, how are we going to approach that? We need to make a survey of what we've got, and we need to kind of have a vision of where we want to go, where we want to get to, and we need to think of lots of different ways in which we can engage with the public and draw in their interest. It's not a community garden if it doesn't include the community. So you've actually got to design it around the needs of the community, and you've got to come in with strategies of how to involve them. We spent a lot of time thinking about that. We came up with the idea of having a regular volunteer day once a week, so that people could kind of conform to a pattern, and we also started putting together a training program. We realised volunteers are absolutely the lifeblood of every organisation, and you have to invest in them. And so we started doing training, and our design for the garden idea started to evolve, and we also thought we've got to do something kind of interesting and visionary. Part of what we discovered was that people aren't that interested in growing, or they don't realise that they're interested in growing. You've got to find a way to engage people's interest to start them off. From our initial talks, what we realised was people are very interested in low-impact buildings. People are interested in the possibilities of... I think we don't do enough with our hands anymore. We're all stuck behind computer screens. So we had this idea that we would build a very interesting structure in our garden, and that might get us noticed. We're also right by the railway line in Newtown, and we noticed that people on the train were looking down to see what we were doing. So we had this idea to build a low impact structure in the garden, just to do something interesting, and immediately we had all sorts of groups wanting to come and work with us, whether they were young defenders groups or young lads looking for work experience. As I say, we're very interested in looking in the waste stream, and we're very interested to see what materials are lying around that potentially we can use that other people don't see the value in. There's lots of waste timber, which you can get hold of, and actually there's lots of people looking for interesting things to do. So we try to fit these ingredients together to try and build something interesting. And before we knew, we had 18, 20 people turning up every week. Firstly, getting involved in building our low impact structure, and then secondly, starting to use the skills that they'd learned just to actually start building the garden and to start building some momentum. So yeah, volunteers from all over places. That's actually one of our funders coming to visit us, which is from Keep Wells Tidy, and we had a tremendous amount of fun putting this structure together, and then using the energy that came from the people around it to really start getting the garden growing and to start developing the complexity of that. Now, we're also really interested in local food. That we are very, very vulnerable in these times now, when most of our food comes from 1,000 miles away. It's grown in Spain and driven here on trucks. All of that takes a lot of diesel to get it here. The footprint of food production is enormous. We're incredibly reliant on inputs from hydrocarbons, from diesel, fertilizer, pesticides. All these things are derived from oil. Oil is becoming scarce. We've used ours up in the North Sea. We're having to go further away to get it. So relocalising food, to me, seems like a very likely part of our possible future. And I also think we need to be exploring how we can do this much more organically and using much less resources. So what's really wonderful about working organically and working with the natural world is to see the garden come alive, whether it's a mycelium starting to penetrate the soil, or to see individuals start to really flourish because they're enjoying the work, to see the garden come to life, and to find lots of different ways to engage the community, to draw them in and get them involved in seeing the possibilities. You know, for our humble little garden that we started 3 years ago, suddenly we were getting international study groups coming to come and talk about growing and talk about community engagement. I think community gardening is an area with a massive future. I actually think that we have the potential to produce 1/3 of all our fresh food from growing it from in and around where we live, whether that's in suburbia or unused urban spaces or the places in between buildings and stuff. There's so much unused green space. We've also realised that whatever it is that we're doing, we need to be able to be generating resources to involve other people. And in gardening, that's really easy. You can propagate plants, you can save seed, you can give it away. There's lots of different ways in which you can get the wider population involved in growing. We're also really interested in this whole notion of edible landscaping. We can get fruit trees into public spaces. We can start actually producing, again, a lot of useful, very productive plants and getting them into public spaces. Change the environment that we're in, change our relationship with food. Why is it that food is so locked up inside the monetary system when it's so easy to produce it yourself? We run courses, we do lots of outreach, we grow unusual crops. We're really trying to inspire people with what is possible. Our soils are made out of the food waste of Newtown that was previously going to landfill. We're using that to build really, really fertile systems. You can't argue with systems that produce this kind of quality produce out of waste. So it's a joy to do it, it's a joy to work with all these different people, it's a joy to be having a chance to try out all sorts of new, innovative, organic growing techniques. This is a series of experiments we've been doing recently with biochar. We all heard about climate change. Climate change is a problem caused by taking carbon out of the ground and putting it into the air. Working with biochar is a system of taking carbon out of the air and putting it back into the ground. There are lots of different ways we can creatively address the problems that we have in our society around us. We just need a slightly more imaginative way of approaching it. Relocalising our food supply, building healthy soils, bringing back the environment back to life. This is how we will deal with resource problems. This is how we'll deal with climate change. But it's something that we have to involve everybody in. Biochar is a farming technique that was developed by the original farmers from the Amazon in Brazil. And it's only really recently starting to come to awareness. So when we were trialling it, we tried growing unusual crops from South America. So that's Oca oxalis, which is an edible tuber that comes from the Andes. Yeah, so, you know, community gardening, it's great. You can turn horrible industrial spaces into beautiful green oases. We're training people to propagate plants. We can give those plants away. We can use those to start new projects in other places. We've got a stand just over there. If you've got any questions, do come and visit. But just at the point when our project really was starting to take off, then Cymharu, the organisation that we're working with, faced a bit of a dilemma of their own. Is Paris County Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided to offer food waste composting out on contract to a firm in Oxford. So now our food waste is driven by truck all the way to Oxford, and we decided to look at other ways in which we could use some of the innovations, some of the momentum we had as an organisation to bring sustainability into the community in different ways. Just so, this is what our garden looks like now. We got told we had to move. It was a bit devastating. We had to take it all down, especially having seen all this life start to flourish there. But in the meantime, the National Lottery came along, and they said, actually, we like what you're doing. Here's £250,000, go away and start doing community gardening on a bigger scale, and start doing it in a way in which you're engaging with a bigger audience. So we launched a project just over a year ago called Get Growing, get-growing.org.uk. You'll find us on the internet. And the next thing that happened to us is we were offered a growing site. I can't find it. We were offered a growing site on the Coleg Palace campus. So now, instead of being tucked behind a factory on a trading estate, we are now mainstream, working within mainstream education. I think everybody needs to start thinking about where their resources are coming from, because they're coming from a long way away and they're coming from non-sustainable sources. We have to change the way we think. We've been fed a myth. We've been fed a myth that there's only one way to feed the world, and it's through industrial agriculture. And I'm afraid that it's not going to be the answer. If we look at the price of food and track that against the price of oil, what we see is that they're totally related. Our intensive food growing systems are essentially systems which convert the oil energy into food energy. We need to be thinking about finding less resource intensive ways of producing food, otherwise we're just not going to be able to afford it. We've got major problems with our food system. We don't know what's in our food anymore. Everything's it's been so processed, it's been transported by such a long distance that there's no accountability anymore. We find that there's all sorts of traces of different animals in our food that we didn't know was there. That's what happens when you have a globalised food system. We need to relocalise. We're told there's one way. I really believe that there's more than one way. There are other ways in which we can approach this. So this is the site we've been given. We've got 3 acres of prime land right smack in the middle of Newtown, next to the college. This is where permaculture and organic growing belongs, right in the heart of the community. I like to say to people, I'm not a green anymore. I'm not interested in being a green. I'm not interested in being out pushed out on the edge, on the periphery somewhere. This is mainstream. Sustainability is mainstream. This is the only way that we will have a future, and we have to start figuring out what that means for ourselves. We can't let anybody else tell us what that is. We have to figure it out for ourselves. So we're in this wonderful opportunity, given this site. This is where we started working last September. We had a big public launch. We do everything we can to try and get people interested in what we're doing. Come and visit us. Really easy to find us. We're there Monday to Friday, right next door to the Havering Theatre. Because our original garden had been designed by a student group as part of a training exercise, we thought this is another way in which this is how you engage the community and how you build a community garden, is you get the community to design it. So we invited people in, we got a group of students, we had representatives from right across the community, all the different groups that we were trying to reach and meet the needs of, and had them come along and input their ideas into our garden design. We came up with all the different elements that they asked for us. We shuffled them all around on a big map, and we figured out a design for the garden, and we presented that back to all of the different stakeholders who we were trying to get to use it. So we did everything we can to meet the needs of the target groups that we were trying to work with, rather than impose our ideas and then tell everybody else what they needed to be doing. So we're still very much actively listening to all of our visitors, course participants and volunteers, and trying to respond to where they want the garden to go. We started on the design, and we had a launch. We've now built up a really wonderful team of volunteers. We've got a whole groups of students within the college who like to come and work with us, and we're trying to make connections to the local kind of politics and purse keepers and gatekeepers of our community, so that we can we need this to be taken much more seriously. Community growing isn't a peripheral activity. Community growing is how we're going to create food security for our future. It's also, growing food is like printing your own money. This is another really good way to engage with people and get them interested. There you go, Ron Finley, basketball player in Los Angeles. He's now a passionate community gardener. He's realised that we've created food deserts in our cities. You can't get any decent fresh produce. There's a whole generation of people growing up right now that have never even eaten any proper food. They've only eaten processed food. We need to find ways to connect with those people and to inspire them and get them involved in growing. So now we're wonderfully resourced in Newtown. We're starting our own local food hub. We set up the Cwmharry Food Company. We buy the surplus food from other growers and we put it into veg boxes and we send it out to the community. We're trying to build a local food economy, and we want people to come in and get involved with us and help shape it. There's lots of different ways to do this. We took on our first group of apprentices this year. I've been wanting to do this for years. Taking 17-year-old kids who have never worked, all they've done is sat in the classroom and fidget around at the back feeling a bit bored, give them some hard skills, get them out in the field doing something meaningful, and it's transformative. It turns them into different people. They become confident, they become outgoing. Our apprentices have all gone off and got jobs. We've now got to do the work ourselves. It's a disaster. But seriously, we need to be really looking, what are the opportunities for the next generation? They're not going to be going into manufacturing and tourism. We don't have the oil and the resources to do it. What are they going to be doing? We need to be addressing these needs, and we need to be asking these questions and exploring these possibilities. So it's an absolute privilege to be working with these young people who have so much energy and dynamism, and they totally get it. When they came, they didn't know anything about food and where it came from. Within a few weeks of working with us, it all started to make sense. We're trying out all sorts of different experimental horticulture techniques. We're growing perennial plants, we're planting orchards. We've developed this idea of micro-allotments so that community members can come and have their own little small plots. We've built a lovely garden. And we're just taking that idea further forward. We've designed our own raised bed system. We're trialling that out in different areas. I'm taking that into schools, I'm actually starting to do outreach work into Liverpool. I'm taking these ideas onto council estate in Liverpool and showing it with people who've been unemployed for 3 generations. I'm showing them how to grow their own food, and they love it. It's changing the environment. So we're in the process of doing what we're doing with the Cwmhari organisation. We've got a partnership with Coleg Paris, we've got a partnership with Coleg Harlech, and we've launched our own Get Growing project. We have to be building like clusters of innovative businesses that can start taking those ideas and reaching them out into the community. And I really, really welcome anybody who's interested in this stuff to come along and visit us. And we're really keen to work with you and to hear your ideas. So we're interested in like micro enterprises, coming up with very simple products that we can get students on teams making and designing and helping us sell. So our raised bed system is one of those products. We're actually working with the technology department in the college. They've innovated on our design, come up with some improvements, and we've started to go away and try building those ourselves. We're developing courses. We're trying to create as many different routes into this as we possibly can. And again, we realise lots about gardening is about construction. A lot about gardening is just learning basic skills of how to use tools and how to work in teams with of other people. And so a lot of this team building skills, confidence building, work experience, learning how to use tools. This isn't specifically gardening, but it all comes under the same banner. So we can get lots of different outputs from what we're doing. We're teaching people how to do fruit tree grafting, not only because it's a useful skill, but because we can generate loads of material of cheap fruit trees which we can now go out and stick out in the community and start changing our landscapes with it. We're also reaching out to the community to find derelict, unloved little spaces and clearing out the rubbish and turning them into gardens. There's community groups popping up all over the place now, taking hold of unused bits of ground and trying to start growing projects. All of those projects need a little bit of nurturing, of support, of training. We're also trying to reach out and do some of that as well. As I said, my particular area is I'm interested in permaculture design, and I teach 2-week intensive courses which give you the whole skill set that you need to be able to go out and start solving these kinds of problems and building intelligent responses to the massive challenges and problems that we face in the world today. We've done it before. We've had the whole Dig for Victory campaign back in the Second World War. We're in a similar situation. We need to start deploying resources differently and getting people involved in growing. So just to finish off, there's a few slides from the work that I'm doing in Liverpool. This is a place called Stockbridge Village. It's just on the outside of Liverpool. It's a high-rise council tower block estate. It's actually one of those totally dysfunctional planning disasters that they did in the late 60s and early 70s. They created communities that didn't work, had all sorts of terrible social problems. I've got my little growing space. I'm right behind the shopping precinct. I'm behind the chip shop and bargain booze. And we're teaching people growing skills. We're doing loads of outreach work. And we're going out onto the housing estates, we're linking in with the community, and we're planting edible gardens and orchards. It's just an absolute delight, again, to connect with community members who actually want to do something to bring their communities to life and invest into them and take some responsibility for it. It's a really, really wonderful thing to be doing, and as I say, I think there's just a massive future. So I'll leave you with the last thought is, you can't buy happiness, you can buy local. And that's about as close as you get. So thank you very much for listening. Come and get involved. We're called Get Growing. We're in Newtown. We're open Monday to Wednesday every week. There's usually someone there Thursday and Friday as well. We have a website at getgrowing.org.uk. There's a photo blog of everything done over the last year. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. Any questions? Come and see me on the stall. Thank you.